Hi, it's John Kelly. In this module, we are going to discuss using the Audit Program Generator. And as always, we want to be efficient and effective, follow professional standards, and document what we have done properly. And in this module, I'm going to show you how the Audit Program Generator can help you do all of those three things. Now, the purpose of this form, we are required in professional standards to instruct assistants in the planned procedures. That's in 2 sections. And that kind of requires an audit program, or at least that's my interpretation of standards. So this is the way that I efficiently and effectively develop an audit program that can be carried forward from year to year that tells the assistants that we use what they need to do on an annual basis. Now, you will see that in the form I have various target scores, and I mathematically have assigned weights, mathematical weights to procedures. And this is for guidance only. You need to use your judgment to determine whether or not in your particular client circumstance the particular procedure is as good as the mathematical score assigned, and sometimes you may decide that it's better than the mathematical score assigned. So you can change those scores, and it's only for guidance. Don't let the math run your life. Let professional judgment run your life. The other reason I developed this form was, and I had a paper-based version of this, and it required people to add up all the weights assigned to audit procedures. And of course, they didn't, or it didn't add, or the adding wasn't clear, and that was very frustrating. The other thing that I am frustrated with about checklists is the reviewer has to spend an awful lot of time going through very carefully, checking to make sure whether or not every box is filled out and ticked off and documented as done. And that's just a very annoying waste of time. So I wanted to develop something whereby that would be done for you, and you would know automatically whether or not everything had been filled out. Also, we have to document dates, and I'm too lazy to write down when I did stuff. So I wanted the date to pop up automatically when I ticked off that I'd done the step. The date that I did that popped up. And the other thing is, it would be really nice if our audit program automatically documented everything we did. And it would be really nice if we could word every audit program, I did this and it was okay. And that will work for some, unfortunately not as many as I would like, but it will work for some. But there are other procedures where clearly it won't. Pick 10 items and look at them. Well, you need to document which 10 items. So you need to reference the audit step to the working paper where the 10 items are looked at. And so in various places throughout this form, there are gray areas that are required to be filled out. And if they're not filled out, if you haven't provided the reference to the audit program and it's considered that it's needed, some kind of reference or some kind of additional description is required. If you don't fill it out, the form won't clear off. So 2 aspects of incomplete steps that are dealt with: steps that are just overlooked and steps where really some additional documentation is required to explain what we have done. And if there is, that documentation is not there, the step doesn't clear. So I wanted that to be clear to me. So 4 topics. The big red X. We're going to talk about why there's a big red X and how you get rid of it. That's actually number 3. Point out that you can roll the form forward, that once you've developed it and spent the time developing it, and it really doesn't take that long to do, but having done that, you can then just roll it forward and use it again in the following year. Talk about how we clear the red X, and there are a number of different logical paths that the steps have that you have to do before they clear. And then we'll go through the major sections of the checklist and see what each of them looks like. So the big red X, and the existence of a big red X, and particularly the statement that says checklist incomplete, indicates exactly that. Something is logically incomplete. And if you complete every step, fill out every gray box, initial every box, all the dates show up, then the big red X is gone, and you know at least that logically the form is complete. You may need to still review whether it's up to snuff with respect to professional standards, if the things that we have written in the gray boxes are appropriate, if the working papers that we refer to in fact, do what we want them to do. You still have to do that, but at least you know that it's all filled out and don't have to spend time on that. You will note that line by line there is a yellow exclamation point, and properly completing the line turns the yellow exclamation point to a green check mark, and you know you've got that cleared off. In the Audit Program Generator, this clears program by program. Audit program by audit program. Clear off. The big red X clears off on the audit program page. And once you've cleared all the audit programs, then the big red X on the cover page will clear. And at the end of each audit program, there is a total of cleared and uncleared steps. So if you've got a big red X and you can't figure out why, you're going to look to see if there's still a yellow exclamation point, and the total at the bottom will tell you how many of them you got to find. And many is the time that I've thought I filled it out and the big red X is still there, and I go, well, what did I miss? And you scroll through looking for the exclamation points and look at the bottom and find out how many you're missing, and using that you will be able to clear it all off. Roll forward, I already said this, but on the configuration page there is a box where you click it and you will delete all initials and dates. The gray areas that you spent time completing remain completed, so you will have to update those as needed, but presumably, for instance, if you did an analytical procedure on working paper B2, presumably you're going to do the same analytical procedure next year. It'd be convenient if it was on B2. The other thing is the gray areas. If you say, I did this work on working paper B2, that's a tip and a hint for the reviewer to go, oh, let me go to page working paper B2 and see if it meets what I want it to meet and if it's satisfactory or not. So that's the roll forward process. Clearing the big red X, as I said, it clears individually page by page. And then the programs and conclusion page, the main page, clears line by line. And once all the lines on the programs and conclusion page are cleared, then you get a full clearing of the whole program generator set of working papers. Now there are 4 main sections in this. There is the programs and conclusion main page, the first page, which is kind of your summary page, kind of a monitor page that tells you how you're doing on planning and completing the audit. The crux form, and forgive the analogy, components of risk under examination, but this really is the crux of the whole audit. Assessing risk of material misstatement and designing procedures, designing the nature, timing, and extent of procedures to address those assessed risks is the most important part of the audit. Because it's so important and because it's necessary for us to link the procedures we do back to the risks we assess, I don't want any of my staff to ever make any comment about there is a risk of this, that, or the other thing anywhere in the file other than on the crux form, because the crux form is where we summarize all those risk factors that we have identified, and we can then link them to audit programs, link them to audit procedures, and then at the end we can reference back and link it back to that we've done procedures to address the risks we identified. So it's a very, very important page. Doesn't look like much, just kind of looks like a blank page, but it's a really important page. Once we've filled out the crux form, that is going to give us a numerical score, which is going to link to our audit program. And there are 2 different kinds of audit programs. There are the programs for cash and receivables all the way through payroll, where we have a number of assertions that we have to address, and we're going to have high, moderate, or low assess a risk of material misstatement. And then there are audit programs for journal entries, contingencies, going concern, and stuff like that, where professional standards really give us an audit program. They say these are the procedures that you must do, and there's not a lot of assessing risk. There's just a standard list of procedures that are done. So they're a little different than, for instance, the cash audit program. So here is the programs and conclusion page, and it's a really important page, and it kind of gives you a summarization of where we are in planning the audit. And as we start to plan the audit, we are first going to answer the 2 questions at the top. Is this a public company or otherwise selected for engagement quality control review? That's a yes or no. It's a toggle box. If you toggle yes, which is the way it is now, the third last line down there, the Engagement Quality Control Checklist, Index 2020, will pop up, and we will have to complete it. If the answer to that question is no, then that line disappears. It's hidden, and we don't complete that. Second question, is this a first-time audit? And often we forget, if it's a first-time audit, that we've got to have some new client acceptance considerations, and we have some initial audit engagement steps that we have to perform. So there are 2 programs down at the bottom there that do that. However, if you tick that to no, those 2 lines also are hidden. So normally, unless you're doing a public company or a first-time audit, those 3 lines at the bottom are hidden and you don't see them. The next step will be to say, well, okay, what does my client have? Do they have cash? Yes, they do. So I'm going to develop an audit program for cash. Do they have investments? No, they don't, so I'm not. So I toggle that to no, and my investment program will disappear. And we go through receivables inventory. We don't have any other assets. We don't have any other liabilities. So we say no to those, and the steps or the programs disappear. Now, we can answer yes or no all the way through payroll. For journal entries, contingencies, and so on through going concern, we have to do those. Those are required. The list of procedures and professional standards, so we can't say no to any of that. Those programs will always be there. The segment program, 4th from the bottom, if there are segments reported, then we need to do audit procedures. Professional standards tell us what those procedures are. So that'll be yes or no, and the program will appear or disappear. So once you have answered all those yes-no questions, A, that'll update to the Crux form, but B, in the rest of the pages in the Excel workbook, the ones that are not applicable disappear. And if something changes, if next year we do have investments, you will toggle that to yes, and a blank investment program will appear, which you will then have to tailor. So that is the planning use of this form, and once you've done that, you're then going to go and start to develop the individual programs. This form becomes useful again at the end of the audit because it is important to highlight to the partner whether there are significant matters that have been found in the section, yes or no. We have to document who reviewed it and when. And it's nice for the preparer to let us know. Now, the individual audit program is going to have each step initialed off by the preparer, but we'd like to know that it's finished. So this is a useful sort of monitor page for the manager or the partner. And if we assume that this is an ongoing audit right now, we can see that actually nothing's been done on anything, but prepaid expenses is done. And so the box that there were no significant matters has been filled in. The reviewer has reviewed it. The date is there. The preparer has initialed that they finished the section. It's ready for review. The date is there. And we can see that the 2 red X's there have turned into green tick marks. And we can see that the program is complete. 4 of 4 steps are complete. So once all of those lines complete and all of the double red X's disappear, then the big red X at the top of the page goes, and we know that logically at least, consistently at least, we've initialed every box, we've filled out every gray box, we've indicated whether or not there were significant matters, who did the review and who did the preparation has been filled out everywhere, and that level of documentation at least has been complete. Now we still have to apply professional judgment to determine and conclude that the procedures we selected are in fact appropriate. The math of this Excel spreadsheet isn't going to tell us that, but it gives us a running head start. This is the Crux form, and as I said, it doesn't look like much, but it is in fact the crux of the audit. It's the most important piece of paper in the audit. And our procedure is that we do risk assessment procedures, and we think, and we have planning discussions, and all of that is with a target of identifying factors that affect risk of material misstatement. And as I said before, this is the only place I want that written down. So if all of those things help us identify a risk of material misstatement factor, here's where we will write it down. And for instance, that box there under cash, which is applicable risk factors, you can type as much as you want in there. It keeps getting bigger as you type. So specify your risk of material misstatement factor, specify the assertion to which it relates, and then you can proceed to assess risk of material misstatement as low, moderate, high, negligible. Now I pre-filled all these out as low. The theory is that having not identified any risk factors, you start at low. And as you identify risk factors, you start to move the assertion up that those risk factors affect or are related to. The intended audit approach column you can fill out or not. Sometimes I just write C audit program, because if I'm doing the planning myself and completing the audit program myself, I will just proceed to do the audit program myself. If the partner wants the manager or the senior to complete the audit program, the partner might decide that they will write a few notes here to describe to the senior the general way they want the audit approach. So that's up to you. The other column there, control risk column, that is the partner deciding to indicate to the person preparing the audit program what extent of control testing is required. X means none. I don't think there are any controls worthy of testing. I don't think there are any controls at all. Either of those things would be X. We're just not going to bother with control testing because it's not relevant in this circumstance. Moderate reduction of control risk would mean that we plan a systems walkthrough and that's it. Low reduction of control risk, we're going to do an awful lot of work on controls, requires partner approval because often it's a very inefficient way of doing things. So that's just a hint as from the partner to the person preparing the program of the extent of control testing that they think is appropriate. The most important and final decision you're going to make is filling out low, low, negligible. And as you fill those out, low, for instance, gives you a target score of 18 points, negligible 3, high, target score of 26 points of audit evidence required. So after you fill out those risk and material misstatement assessments link forward to the audit program, so you will now know the target, how much evidence we're supposed to get. One of the problems with audit programs is if you just have a standard list of procedures, the tendency is just to do them all. And then you're going to have a really inefficient audit because you have done enough work for more than high when risk was really low. So if risk is really low, we've got to be brave and do only a small amount of work because that is all the risk model requires that we do. So that's the crux form, really important piece of paper. Doesn't look like much though. Now here's an example of an audit program, and it's only the top of the audit program. This runs on for probably 2 or 3 pages. There are many different procedures that you can use. And this is just a laundry list. This is all of the audit procedures that an auditing textbook would have. The only thing that I've done is I've done analytical procedures are first, because the theory is that analytical procedures are the most efficient and effective, so that's the first place we would look. You don't see it on this page, but the next group of procedures you would come to are control testing, particularly a systems walkthrough, because again, that tends to be efficient and effective. So we will start our planning with analytical procedures and a systems walkthrough, and then we're going to say, well, what are the further audit procedures that I require? And my further audit procedures can either be further control testing. We are required to do substantive testing, but analytical procedures are a substantive procedure, so if we conclude that that's enough, that's okay. If it's not enough, then there is going to be a list of other further substantive audit procedures that we're going to pick from to get to the point that we've reached our target score. Now along the left-hand column there you will see yes, no, yes, no. That means that you can select or deselect each of those procedures as is your wish. The first step has been selected, and that is to review financial statements for reasonableness, and other than items noted in the crux form, I found no matters of interest. That's kind of self-documenting. So we can just initial that and the date pops in and it clears up. I guess the one fly in the completely self-documenting ointment there is that we really do require an expectation. For an analytical procedure to work, we need to have an expectation and we need to document that. So that's the reason for the gray box, that I needed to describe what my expectation was, and my expectation was that revenue this year and last year would be about the same, and I compared and they were, and I did that by revenue type, and now I'm satisfied. If I decided that I wanted some more evidence from my analytical procedure, and a way of doing that was to do the test monthly, I would have selected yes for the second part of that and got a more detailed test, and there's a gray box there because now probably we're going to need a working paper where we do something monthly in Excel or something like that. So we would then refer to see working paper such and such where we did that. You will see when I select no that the area where there was a numerical score, because there are standard numerical scores throughout here, it's turned blue and they're not there. And so that indicates to the reviewer that that step in particular wasn't selected. Just to note, by the way, we are kind of required to do analytical procedures on revenues because we're looking for fraudulent misstatement due to revenue recognition. So an analytical procedure is a good thing to do for that. We are required to conclude if we think that the risk of material misstatement of fraud due to revenue recognition is not applicable. We are required to conclude, and this requires that the partner sign off on the third major box down there, 1 and 2 conclusion. So as we have initialed, so the preparer JFK completed that step on 2014-05-26 and got 4 points across the line. You will see that for cutoff, it's blue, and that means that that has changed. So that's a highlights to the reviewer that the person who prepared this program decided that in this particular circumstance, that particular test, and let's not argue whether that's really valid or not, probably isn't, but just for illustrative purposes to show that when you change it, when you change the numerical score either up or down, it turns blue, and that highlights that to the reviewer. The other thing to notice here, we're doing the audit of revenues and receivables together because many times procedures we do on revenues also affect receivables and vice versa. So if that happens, and if the procedure we did affected both, and for instance, a systems walkthrough is a good example. A systems walkthrough of the sales receivables receipts system gives us evidence for both revenues and accounts receivable. So all of the assertions are listed there, first for revenues and second for receivables, occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cutoff, classification, existence, rights and obligations, completeness, and valuation. So all of our assertions are there, and all of our procedures have numerical scores assigned. And you will see the very top 2 lines on the right there where there are red boxes. The second line is our numerical target score. We decided it was low, so it's 18. And we see the score that we've got. We'll see for valuation we've got 31 points and we only need 18. We probably have got too much and we probably can delete some procedures. But for existence of receivables, target score of 18 due to low, we've only got 14 points. We're kind of short. For occurrence and completeness of revenues, we're at 17 points and we need 18. Maybe we just decide that our first analytical procedure there gives us 5 and that does it, and we're allowed to do that. This is your professional judgment. This is your evaluation of whether or not the steps you have chosen satisfy the assessed level of risk of material misstatement. I would say that for existence of receivables, if we need 18 and we only got 14, we're kind of short, and that's an indication to everyone, the preparer and the reviewer, that we need to take a look at how much testing we've done and whether or not we need to do something at a greater scope, a different test, a better analytical procedure. Something needs to be done. We really don't have enough audit satisfaction for existence of revenues. So in order to clear off the big red X there, you have to satisfactorily complete all the lines and turn all the yellow exclamation points to green tick marks. You also have to make sure that the red boxes in your audit satisfaction go away. So we've concluded that we've done enough, planned to do enough work, and done enough work. And having done that, all the red goes away, and we get a clean audit program. Now here's an example of that: prepaid expenses where we've assessed as negligible, so we only needed 3 points. So we did a brief analytical procedure, got 5 points. We selected 1 of 4 procedures. We did it, we initialed it, we cleared it. 5 points is more than 3 points. You'll see down at the bottom right hand there, it says total evidence obtained is 5 points. Total target was 3 points. We've met the evidence. 4 little N's show there because we assessed every assertion as negligible inherent risk. So incomplete or invalid entries is 0, total is 4, we're done. That program clears and the big red X is gone. Now this is the second type of audit program: going concern, contingencies, subsequent events. Basically, professional standards give us this list, and we basically just have to complete each line. There's a yellow exclamation point, complete the line, and it will turn to a green tick. Again, if you, in the first column there, put in your initials, and there's a drop-down box where on the configuration page everybody puts their name and initials, you will click the drop-down box, select your initials, the date pops in, you've done those. These procedures are either the kind where I was supposed to do something. So step number 1 is I was supposed to consider something, and the activity of considering is I document that I considered it. The second step's an either or. Either I found the first step or I found the second step, and you will pick one or the other. If you pick both, it doesn't clear, of course. And because there's a gray box, whichever one you pick, you have to write down what it is that you did to satisfy that step. So you will proceed through all of those programs to write that down, and that program will clear and the big red X will go away. Now, when you are reviewing the checklist to see whether it's complete, first of all, the big red X disappearing is an enormous help because you now know everything's been filled out and dated and completed properly. So now the reviewer can focus on the gray areas. Are these appropriately filled out? The reviewer can also look at the blue spots to see whether someone has increased or decreased the amount of satisfaction a test is giving. And then if there is an indication of risk of material misstatement, as you review the audit file and you see something that causes you to believe there's a risk of material misstatement, has that been documented on the crux form? And that's how that you would review this form. So, thanks for listening.